Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. In today's video, we'll be making this beautiful deep V-neck gathered bust ruffle hem dress with a back shirt waist. Before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. I'll be using this crepe fabric for this tutorial. It is 5 yards and I'll also be using a lining. This is my half scale block. I have a detailed video on how to draft the half scale block. I'll put the link on the description box. So here on the back piece, my shoulder to the half length is 16 inches. So on the front piece, it is 18 inches. So it is 18 inches because of this bust dart. The 2 inches for bust dart. So when I take in the 2 inches, the side seams are going to align, as you can see. Starting with the front piece, for the neck I use the standard measurement, which is 3 by 3 inches. Now on this dress I'll be using 3.5 inches for the neck width. So I'm adding ½ inch here, and for the neck depth I'll be using 12 inches. So it's a deep V-neck. I'll be using 12 inches and I'll connect it this way. After doing that, on the side here, I'm going to be marking my shoulder to underbust measurement, which is 14 inches. And I'll come down by 1 inch, that is 15 inches. So I'll connect this 15 inches to this 12 inches this way, as you can see me do. I'll be taking a dart on the neckline to avoid neckline gaping. To do that, I am going to, from my dart here, I'm going to make a slant line this way, and from this point I'll go down by 3/4 inch. You can go down by ½ inch or 3/4 inch this way, and I'll connect it to the dart, as you can see me do. So this is going to avoid gaping. It will pull the neckline together for a better fit. So this is what we have. I did the same thing on the other side of the pattern paper, as you can see. Now I'll cut it out starting from the waist dart close to the folded edge. So I'll cut it through this way, leaving about 1/4 inch. In order to close the waist dart, I'll open the neck dart. I'll close the waist dart, use my sellotape to secure it. As you can see, this line is no longer aligned. I'll just go ahead and connect both points back. Okay, and I'll cut it out. I'll also close the dart on the other side and secure it. This is the lower part. I'll keep it aside. Now I'll go ahead and close the neck dart and secure it. As you can see, it is no longer aligned. I'll go ahead and connect both points together this way, and I'll cut it out. The next thing I'm going to do is to close the bust dart. So I'll cut through this way and I'll close the dart, secure it, and cut out the excess on the side seam. So this is what we have. Now I'll cut out the remaining dart leg, and I'll measure what I have here on the shoulder and mark the midpoint. I'll connect the midpoint to the dart this way and I'll cut through. I'll be making gathers on the shoulder and the bust area. So at this point, you can just use one set for your dress. Okay, so on the shoulder, I'll be adding extra 2 inches for my gathers. And on the bust area, I'll be adding about 4 inches. So placing it on another pattern paper this way, I'm going to align it. So remember, I used 3.5 inches on the neck width, so I'll be placing the pattern on the 3.5 inches this way. Yeah, and on the shoulder I'll be adding 2 inches, like I said, for my gathers. I will also slant the shoulder this way. On the bust area here, I'll be using 4 inches for the splash and spread. And I'll use a sellotape to keep it in place. I'll connect these points together this way and I'll cut it out. So this is what we have. Like I said, I'll gather the shoulder and also the bust area. So this is the lower part, and the gathers, after making my gathers, I'll ensure that it fits the lower part. Now on the lower part of the front piece, as you can see, there's a little gathers on that lower part. So to do that, I am going to take out this lower part and so I've traced it on another pattern paper. So what I'll do is I'll mark the midpoint this way and cut it out. I'll be using another pattern paper for my splash and spread, so I'll be using 4 inches for that. So I'll place it this way and secure it with a sellotape and connect the side seam and cut it out. On my fabric, I'll be cutting this part out on fold. Okay, so I'll be making gathers on both sides to fit in the actual lower part of the front piece. At this point, if you don't understand, don't worry. When I cut it out on my fabric, you would understand. I'll be cutting ×2, that is 1 for the fabric and 1 for the lining. So if you don't want to add the lining, you can just do 1. Okay, so I'll be cutting this lower part separately, and I'll also be cutting this one that I'll be using for the gathers separately on fold. So that is it for the front piece. Now for the back piece, I have extra 1.5 inches for my dart intake here. So this dress doesn't have a zipper. I'll be making a shed with my elastic thread on the back piece. I'll be leaving that 1.5 inches for the dart. I'll not be taking it out. So I need extra inches for my gathers. This is what the back piece looks like. So before I do that, I am going to take out 3 inches on the back piece for the band. I'll cut it out. I'll cut through this way and place it on another pattern paper. I'll be using 2 inches for the splash and spread. Remember, I have extra 1.5 inches already for the dart, so plus these 2 inches, that is 3.5 inches. So I'll connect it and cut it out this way, as you can see me do. This is what we have, and this is the band. As you can see, they are not aligned. Remember, I added 2 inches for the splash and spread, so I have 12.5 inches here. So I'll also be adding the same 2 inches I added on the bodice. I'll be adding that 2 inches on the band. So I'll do that on my fabric, so both the bodice and the band will be aligned. So that is it for the back piece. I've gone ahead to cut out the front piece on my fabric, adding ½ inch on the shoulder, armhole, and 1 inch for the side seam, and also ½ inch to join to the lower part. Okay, so I cut out ×4, 2 for the fabric and 2 for the lining, using just 1 piece. So this is what we have. We're sewing on 1/4 inch on the neckline. Now for the lower part of the front piece, I've gone ahead to cut it out on my fabric, as you can see, adding 1 inch on the side seam and ½ inch on the upper and the lower part. So I cut it out on fold, as you can see. So this is how it is going to come out. And I've also cut out the other part with ruffle on my fabric, adding 1 inch for side seam and ½ inch on both the upper and the lower part, as you can see. So what I was trying to explain is I am going to be making gathers on both sides. Okay, I'll be making gathers on both sides with the one with ruffle, and I'll gather it this way, and I'll make sure it fits the actual lower part. I've also cut out the back piece on my fabric, adding ½ inch on the shoulder and 1 inch on the side seam, as you can see, and also ½ inch on the lower part. For the neckline, I cut out 1 inch for the neck depth. I'll be cutting out ½ inch this way. Okay, so I cut out 1.5 inches for the neck depth. So when I use my elastic thread on the band, this is going to be gathered this way. So on the band, I've added my extra 2 inches like I said, plus 1 inch for side seam. So this is how it came out. Both the bodice and the band are equal, as you can see. This is 27.5 inches and this is also 27.5 inches. So on the band, I'll be using my elastic thread to make gathers on the band, and I'll attach it to the upper part of the back piece. Starting with the front piece, I'll go ahead and sew on 1/4 inch on the neckline like I said. After doing that, I'll notch, iron open and fold it and iron properly. So this is how it came out. Now from the side seam, I'll go in by 5 inches this way, and I'll be sewing from this folded edge here, from 1/2 inch on the folded edge to the 5 inches. I'll be making double gathered stitch for my gathers. After making the gathered stitch, I'll pick both ends of the thread and make my gathers. So you want to make sure the gathers is the same width as this lower part, okay? This is the lower part and this is the one with gathers. Like I said, I'll be making gathered stitch on both sides to fit in the actual lower part. So now I'll be making double gather stitch on both sides. I've done that. I'll pick both ends of the thread and make my gathers, and I'll ensure it is the same width as the actual lower part. As you can see, they are aligned. I'll keep it aside. So I'll be joining the upper part and the lower part. I'll be placing the right sides together this way, and I'll align the midpoints. Okay, make sure to align the midpoint. This is the midpoint of the lower part. Make sure to align it with the upper part. I'll do that and join by 1/2 inch. I've done that and this is how it came out. I'll turn it over to the wrong side. I'll be attaching the one with ruffle. Okay, so I'll place the right side this way. So I'm placing the right sides of both the lower parts together with the cup at the middle, if that makes sense. I will align the midpoint and I'll sew right on the 1/2 inch I made earlier. I've done that. I've sewed on 1/2 inch following the shape, and this is how it came out. Okay, so the wrong sides are facing each other, as you can see. Now I'll align the side seam with the gathers and I'll sew by 1/2 inch. I'll join it together by 1/2 inch. I'll do the same thing on the other side, and I'll also join the hem. I've done that and this is how it came out. As you can see, both the wrong side and the right sides are neat, and I've also pressed it down. I've stitched on the hem. So that is it for the front piece. Now on the band of the back piece, I've gone ahead to mark 1/2 inch on the upper and the lower parts for sewing allowance. Now on the remaining part, I'll be marking 1 centimeter to 7 centimeter for my ruffle. So I'll be using an elastic thread to make ruffle on the band. So I'll mark the 1 centimeter to 7 centimeter all through the band this way. Using an elastic thread, I'll wind the thread on the bobbin this way. Okay, I'll make sure I'm not stretching the elastic thread, and I am going to start sewing on the lines. The guidelines are marked. So this is what we have. I'll go ahead and press it down to keep it in place. I've done that. Now I'll be attaching it to the upper part of the back piece. This is the back piece. So I'll be placing the right sides together this way. Remember, the widths are the same. So what I'm going to do is, as I'm joining by 1/2 inch, I'll be stretching the band to fit in the bodice. Okay, I've done that, and this is how it came out. I've gone ahead to iron it. So what I have here is 12 inches plus 1 inch on both sides for side seam instead of 19 inches. So this is going to snatch the waist. I've gone ahead to use using the fabric as a bias tip to finish up the neckline. That is it for the back piece. So the front and the back pieces are ready. I'll keep it aside. For the lower part of the dress, I'll be using this pattern paper. This is the waistline. From the waistline, I'll mark my waist to hip point. So placing my measuring tape on the waist, taking out the shoulder to half length, which is 16 inches. I'll be marking the full length of this gown. So assuming the full length of the dress is 45 inches, I'll go ahead and mark that out. The width of this pattern paper I'm working with is 22 inches. So this is an A-line dress. So to know the amount of fabric to use, just mark your quarter of your hip circumference plus 5 or 6 inches, then 1 inch for side seam. So this is the front piece. On the waistline, I'll mark quarter of my waist circumference plus 1 inch for side seam. And on the hip measurement, I'll mark quarter of my hip measurement plus 1.5 inches for ease. That's 12.5 inches plus 1 inch for side seam. That's 13.5 inches. Now on the hem, I'll be adding extra 6 inches on quarter of my hip circumference plus 1 inch for side seam. I will connect the points this way, and I'll cut it out, adding 1/2 inch on the waist for joining allowance. I'm going to measure from the waist to the hem. What I have here is 29 inches. I'm going to divide this 29 inches by 4. That is for the 4 layers of the dress. Okay, so in case you're making 4 layers, you're going to divide the full length by 4 or by 3 or by 5, depends on how many you want. So after dividing it, I got 7.25. I'm marking 7.25 this way. Okay, these are the 4 layers. I'll go ahead and cut it out. I'll be cutting this out on my lining. Okay, so if I'm cutting it out on my lining, I am going to be adding 1/2 inch for sewing allowances both on the upper and the lower part of each layer. Okay, but I'll be making 3 layers for my dress, so I'll not be making 4. I'll be making 3 layers for my dress because I don't have enough fabric. So I'll be taking out the 4th layer. These are for the front pieces. Okay, I'll be cutting out the back separately. Remember, the front and the back waist are different. So for the back, I've gone ahead to mark the waistline, hip line and the hemline using the same measurement. Okay, so remember what I used on the waist is 27 inches. Okay, that is 13.5 inches. I added extra 1.5 inches for that and 2 inches for my splash and spread. So I have 13.5 inches. I'm marking the same 13.5 inches on the waist, and I'll mark the hip line. Remember, I added 1.5 inches on the hip for ease and 1 inch for side seam. I'm doing the same thing on the back piece, just the waist that is different. So I'll go ahead and connect it and cut it out, adding 1/2 inch on the waist. So what I got here is also 29 inches, or also divided by 4 for the 4 layers. This is it. I'll cut it out, and like I said, I'll be making 3 layers because I don't have enough fabric. So I'll be taking out this 4th layer. Okay, I'll be using just the 3 layers. I'll go ahead and cut it out on my lining, both the front and the back. I've done that. Starting from the front, like I said, I cut out just 3 layers. So I've already added 1/2 inch on the waist. So I added on the lower part, upper and the lower part of each of the layer. So what I will have on the full length of my dress is taking out 16 inches for my half length, so this is 38 inches for the lining. On the fabric, I'll be making the ruffle 2 inches longer, so I'll have 40 inches for the full length of my dress. Cutting it out on fold, these are the 3 layers. So the length is 8.25 plus sewing allowance. So for my fabric, I'll be adding 2 inches to that. That is 10.25, or let's say 10.5 inches. Also on the back piece, I've cut it out on the lining, adding ½ inch on the upper and the lower part, as you can see. Now I'll be joining the side seam of the front and the back piece on each layer. So this is the front piece and this is the back of the first layer. I'll be joining 1 inch for side seam. On the second layer, this is the front piece and this is the back piece. So placing the right sides together, I'll join both sides by 1 inch. I'll do the same thing on the third layer of the front and the back pieces. I've done that. I've joined the side seam of each layer. Starting from the third layer, I'm going to measure what I have here on the upper part. This is 54 inches, so I'll times that by 3 inches for my ruffle. So these are for the front and the back pieces. I cut out 11.5 inches. So I've used 1 inch to hem, so I'm left with 10.5 inches. Remember I said the ruffle will be 2 inches longer than the lining. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll join the sides together, the front and the back. After doing that, I'll make gathered stitch, double gathered stitch on ½ inch and gather it, and I'll make sure it is up to the 54 inches. I'll do the same thing on the second layer and the first layer. I've done that on the third layer. Okay, so on the hem, I am just going to hem, and on this upper part, I'll be attaching the ruffle. This is the wrong side of the ruffle. I'll be attaching the wrong side of the ruffle on the right side of the lining. Okay, so I'll place it, I'll tuck the lining in this way. That will be the right side of the lining is facing the wrong side of the ruffle. I'll go ahead and align the side seam. After doing that, I'll bring out the second layer of the lining. Now I'll be joining the second and the third layer. This is the right side of the gathers and the right side of the lining. So I'll turn it over to the wrong side this way and align the side seam. Make sure to align the back lining and the front lining. As you can see, the right sides of both linings are facing each other and the ruffle is at the middle. So I'll pin down the midpoint, pin down the side seams. I'll make sure they are aligned and I'll sew around by ½ inch. I've done that. I've joined by ½ inch, as you can see. So this is how it came out. I'll be attaching the second ruffle. This is the right side of the ruffle and the wrong side. So I'll be placing the wrong side of the ruffle on the right side of the lining, and I'll align the side seam. I'll bring out the first layer of the lining, turn it to the wrong side. So I'll be attaching this part. I'll tuck it in this way, making sure the back and the front are aligned. I'll also align the side seam. I'll also align the midpoints of both the front and the back lining, and I'll sew around by ½ inch. I've done that and this is how it came out. I've attached the third and the second layer. Now I'll be attaching the first layer. Okay, so I'll be placing the wrong side of the ruffle on the right side of the lining this way. Align the side seam and sew around by ½ inch. I've done that So in case you want to make yours 4 layers, you can go ahead and use the same process and attach the 4th layer. So for me, I'll just be hemming this, and in case you want to make yours shorter than this, you can go ahead and do that. I just want mine a bit longer. So for the upper part of the dress, I've gone ahead to make double gather stitch on the shoulder on both the lining and the fabric. Okay, so I'll pick both ends of the thread and make gathers, and I'll ensure it is the same width as the back piece. I'll be joining the front and the back piece. So I'll place the right sides together and join 1 inch on the side seam, and on the shoulder I'll place the back piece on the midpoint this way and use the lining to turn it over, just the way you see me do, and then I'll sew on 1/2 inch. So I've done that, I've joined the side seam, and I ensure that the band and this part, joint part on the front piece, are aligned, as you can see. And this is the gathers on the shoulder. We're joining the upper part and the lower part together. So I'll bring down the lower part and I'll mark the back and the front. Remember, the back waist is wider than the front, so align the front piece on the front and the back on the back. Okay, so I'll align the side seam and I'll join by 1/2 inch. So on the back, I'm going to stretch the upper part to fit in the lower part. Remember, it has an elastic thread. I've done that. This is how beautiful it came out. So that is it for the dress. Now I'll be cutting out the sleeve. So this is my basic sleeve. I have a detailed video on how to draft a basic sleeve. I added extra 3 inches above this way because of the gathers on the shoulder. So the length is 13 inches. I cut out 14 inches plus 1 inch for hemming allowance, which is also the elastic casing. So I marked exactly what I have here on the hem because I'll be attaching an elastic band on the hem of the sleeve. Now I'll curve the sleeve to the 3 inches this way and cut it out. So I noticed the 3 inches was too much, so you can use about 2 inches. Now I'll be cutting it out on my fabric. So I cut out both sleeves. I'm just going to mark where I will make my gathers. So I'll notch that point. So this is what the sleeve looks like. I am going to be making gathers from this point that I notched. So I'll be making double gather stitch and I'll gather it and I'll join the side seam and also hem. I've done that. I've made the gathers, as you can see, and I have also joined the side seam and hemmed. So I left about 1 inch opening that will pass my elastic band. So this is the elastic band. I cut out 13 inches for the elastic band, which is my round elbow measurement. After doing that, I'll join the elastic and sew back the 1 inch and attach it to the dress. I've done that and I've joined back the 1 inch. This is how beautiful it came out. So guys, you have come to the end of this tutorial. If you learned a thing or two, kindly give this video a thumbs up, click on the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.